All right, let's take a look at chapter 5. I think I'll split up the videos into chapter 5 and chapter 6 just because there is a lot to cover in these two. One thing I want you to notice about chapter 5 is that George is absent. We talked about the two of them providing a balance for each other. George is not there, and Lenny gets himself into a great deal of trouble. This power that he has, he's immediately shown as dangerous because he doesn't know how to control his power. He ends up killing the puppy. He was just too rough with it. And obviously, that is not the only thing he kills in chapter 5. But for the sake of the argument of balance from these two foils, George isn't there. George should have been there. And because George wasn't there, you see Lenny make mistakes that were obviously very harmful to the dream. One thing, obviously, Curley's wife is there to tempt Lenny. She has gotten dressed up to go and tempt him. Right away in the chapter, page 86, Curley's wife came around the end of the last stall. I mean, he's there in the barn. She came very quietly so that Lenny didn't see her. She wore her bright cotton dress and the mules with the red ostrich feathers. She got dressed up in a dress to go to the barn. I don't know what you typically put on to go to the barn, but I doubt it's a dress. Her face was made up. She put on makeup to go to the barn, and the little sausage curls were all in place. She did her hair. She was quite near to him before Lenny looked up and saw her. And she's dressed to impress. She's dressed to woo. She's dressed to draw him in. And a couple paragraphs down, page 87, she moved closer to him, a lot of proximity here, and she spoke soothingly. She's there to draw him in. Don't you worry about talking to me. Listen to the guys out there. They got $4 betting that tournament. None of them ain't going to leave till it's over. Lenny, of course, has heard, don't talk to this woman. Lenny says, if George sees me talking to you, he'll give me hell. He told me so. And she snaps. And again, we see her real person here. What's the matter with me? She cried. Ain't I got a right to talk to nobody? What do you think I am anyway? You're a nice guy. I don't know why I can't talk to you. I ain't doing no harm to you. She is intensely lonely. Her actions are deplorable, but there are a reason for her actions, and that is this intense loneliness. In the same way that Crooks is somewhat gruff because of his forced loneliness, she is forced to become a seductress. It's the only thing for a woman in this time period, in this setting, who has married somebody who doesn't care about her. In order to get attention, she must use looks and sex. This is the only way to get attention. And so Steinbeck is making a point here also about the plight of a female in this social setting. Well, we also see her American dream, her dream. It's different than the fake, the unfulfilling dream that we've been talking about, and the fulfilling, long-term, real American dream that George and Lenny are chasing. She had a different one. Hers was also an American dream, this get rich quick, this win the lottery ticket of fame and fortune, get famous, get into the movies sort of dream. This is the YouTube dream. This is the Bieberization of America sort of dream. Get rich and famous based on looks and skill, and do it quick and fast and become rich and famous. And that's what you have to look forward to. It's not an uncommon one here in society, and she represents that dream. But like all of us, or in this book, for all of our characters, the best laid schemes of mice and men and of Curly's wife often go wrong. Her dream does not work out. She had hope for it. She lost that hope, and she is left desperate. You also see her make a very important statement on page 90. One of the last things she says, she's talking to Lenny. They're having a nice time. She's figured out he's good to talk to. And she says, you're nuts, but you're a kind of nice fella. It is nuts. It is crazy. It is so abnormal to be a nice fellow. The only explanation that anyone can have, and this has come up before in the book, the only explanation for Lenny's kindness and his humanity is that he's nuts. It's that rare for somebody to behave with this level of humanity. So however much common sense he might not have, he's got more humanity than so many of the other characters, so much so that they have to view him as nuts. You remember the poem Much Madness is Divinest Sense by Emily Dickinson. Well, he's providing good sense with his kindness, and it's defined as madness by the world. I want to take you to the end of chapter 5 to show you exactly what a loss of hope looks like. Curley's wife is dead. We said that there were two main obstacles they had to overcome. They overcame Curley. They could not overcome Curley's wife. Lenny has killed her. That effectively ends the dream for them. Nothing is left. And we don't see George's desperation yet, but we do see Candy's. Candy is distraught. And chapter 5 ends with our picture of what it looks like when, with the grief and pain, the third line of the poem, and leave us not but grief and pain. Well, this is what it looks like. And when they were gone, Candy squatted down in the hay and watched the face of Curly's wife. Poor bastard, he said softly. He could very well be talking about himself here. The sound of the men grew fainter. The barn was darkening gradually, and in their stalls the horses shifted their feet and rattled the halter chains. Old Candy lay down in the hay and covered his eyes with his arm. This old, broken man, with his face buried in the hay, crying for the loss of his dream, that is your picture of grief and pain. This is the result of hope denied, and now he must endure the grief and pain. It's a beautiful end of the chapter. The interesting thing about this book, I've read a lot about Steinbeck, and one of the things he was trying to do with this book, it was a grand experiment. He wanted to see if he could write a novel that was almost like a play. And so each chapter is its own scene in the play. And if you look, this entire thing could be played on a stage. Every chapter, you have the chapter begins with essentially stage directions, with a setting to say, here's what's on the stage. And they never move from that. In the chapter, there's no movement from that single scene. Well, here in chapter 5, the barn is that single scene. And so characters might rush on and rush off, but it's all held there. And the curtain would fall on this image of Candy laying in the hay. And so it is chilling. We know how important beginnings and endings are. And what you see right before the curtain falls, for those of you familiar with drama, I mean, it's typically intense. And we have a great intensity on this curtain fall to chapter 5. And it is Candy showing the grief and pain from the lost hope. So that's chapter 5. I'll create another video for chapter 6.